Hi, everyone. Heather here with PersephoneReturns.com, and I am back again with Robert Phoenix. Hello, Robert.
Hi, Heather.
Hi. And so today we're going to be talking again about the lunar month ahead and this big new moon solar eclipse that's happening for the final time in Leo for the next, we're not going to have a new moon north node solar eclipse like this for another 19 years. And so this is going to be kind of a big one. And so we're going to get into sort of where we've sort of come from this eclipse season and where we're headed in the month ahead with, you know, the eclipses, Mercury and Mars stationing retrograde and all of that. And so, Robert and I were talking a little bit off camera about sort of what's been going on with social media lately, which is very much an Aquarian thing, and the South Node being an Aquarius. And so do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, it's really fascinating. We could see this coming, kind of like if you're really paying attention, you could see this coming from a mile away, right? And it's really linked in a lot of ways to what's been going on with, the true node / north node in Leo. And I was writing about this morning. And so we've had a ton of intensity and emotional currency around children with that true node in Leo, okay? One of the big things that's come out, and it started to come out, right around the time Trump was about to be elected, going back to October of 2016, the big October surprise, the WikiLeaks dump, was the whole Pizzagate stuff.
Yeah.
And that's when, and I remember sitting down at Gaia talking with Regina's producer, and I said, the true node is moving into Leo. We need to talk about children. We need to talk about, what's going on with Pizzagate. Trust me, it's going to be a big deal. And she was like, whoa, let's not talk about it too much, because people were starting to get into hot water around talking about Pizzagate. Alex Jones, we're going to talk about him, had just stepped into a pile of shit. I mean, he was literally set up when he was going through the whole Pizzagate material. And he's been set up a few times on InfoWars. And then they had this really weird kind of, I think it was a false flag where this guy came up to Comet Ping Pong Pizza, and he brought a gun. You remember that whole thing?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, the whole thing was just so bizarre. Again, you drop down, you look at the connections with the guy. The guy's father is a politician. I mean, the whole thing was just totally weird. And then there was a lawyer who was somehow there, out of the blue, lives in New Jersey, but decided to go to Comet Ping Pong that day. And he got on Alex's show and he busted Alex's chops, right?
Yeah.
And Alex had to almost do kind of a public recanting of his position around this. But it all started then, and it's been continuing to, snowball, whether it's been children and child trafficking or, the kids down at the border, separate from their parents. We've had a ton of what I call emotional currency with children. And then the latest took place probably about 3 weeks ago when there was a director by the name of James Gunn. And James Gunn produced or directed the Guardians of the Galaxy series.
Okay.
Big-time director, right? Big-time director. And I think he did that, was it Super 8? That superhero kind of movie with Nick Cage. Anyway, Mike Cernovich went into his Twitter feed, and he found literally thousands of tweets with him cracking jokes about, sleeping with kids.
Oh my gosh.
I mean, one or two. It's like, okay, you got a weird, dark sense of humor. You kind of got on the edge. But this guy had a freaking resume, right? Like a lifelong resume of really deplorable tweets about kids.
Oh, wow.
And that came to the surface in Disney, which, thinks it still stands for family and kids, but really doesn't. They cut James Gunn loose. They said, you're done. We can't have you. So his Twitter feed caught up with him because clearly it was very theoretically contrary to Disney's programming and mission. And
Yeah.
then all of a sudden there were like 50,000 people who started an online petition and you can't do this, you got to rehire them. Now keep in mind, this is kids, right?
Yeah.
And this was a shot across the bow. And the left was like, okay, it all started really with Roseanne. That's where it started. When Roseanne made her, silly, dumb tweet about Valerie Jarrett and called her a sand monkey, right, or whatever, which is stupid. And all these people on the right, like, oh, wow, what's up, man? Can't you freely express yourself, political correctness, blah, blah. Look, you can.
Yeah.
But in our society, if you do that, you're going to pay the price.
Well, yeah, because everybody else has that same right to express their discontent with what she was saying, and so there's
right.
backlash. Yeah.
But then when you get into things like sponsors and TV shows, you're screwed. The only way that you can really get away with it is to be non-aligned and not depend on some third party for your sustenance, which is very difficult. But if you're committed, you can do it. So that's where it started. And then the right was like, well, screw you. And Cernovich went in and found this guy, James Gunn's material. So now I think they decided that they were going to up the ante. They're like, okay, you've gone after James Gunn. You went after Michael Ian Black. Now we're going to go after the big whale. And the big whale is Alex Jones.
Yeah.
He's Moby Dick. And that's what they did. They went after him. And so here we have the true node and the south node axis. Right? This is the dynamic. Because Jones, as you and I were talking about, theoretically is an Aquarius.
Yeah.
If he's not Bill Hicks.
Yeah, if he's not Bill Hicks, which I still think he might be.
He could be Bill Hicks.
Yeah. If the viewers don't know about this, Google it. Just there's a whole bunch of content out there about Alex Jones actually being Bill Hicks. And
you and I could do a whole show on it, but we don't have enough time.
Yeah.
But if you look at Alex Jones, he's supposed to be 44 years old. I don't know. He looks a little road weary for 44, if you ask me.
Yeah, but he's also very angry and stress. You could tell he probably has really high blood pressure, and he's just you know what I mean? Stress will do that to you. So, I mean, maybe. But at the same time, I mean, when you look at what happened surrounding Bill Hicks and then the conversion to Alex Jones, it does make sense with the time frame and
the timeline totally fits. And then the missing link, of course, is Kevin Booth, the producer, who was Bill Hicks's best friend.
Yeah.
And then he just immediately transitions into Alex Jones. So,
it's interesting. If Bill Hicks gained a few pounds, dyed his hair blonde, it could be.
Well, there's also some dental stuff going on too that you can see. But what we're really getting at here is that Alex Jones, who, by the way, his birthday is theoretical birthday is February 11th. Which puts it right in alignment with this eclipse, right? So his sun will be opposite the sun during this eclipse.
Yeah, that's really intense. And that means, the South Node's been transiting over his sun all year, which is why he's having so many issues. And the South Node in Aquarius in general is issues with social media, right? Aquarius, social media, technology, the internet, connecting with
exactly. We're seeing this right now on a macro level.
Yeah.
We're seeing this south node being exposed, right? It's the underbelly. It's like where we are vulnerable in terms of being able to freely express who we are and what we do.
Yes.
And part of the reason why that's taken place is because, we've had these hate speech laws on the books now since I think about 2009, 2010, right around there. And I remember when they started to hit, I just thought to myself, we're headed for trouble here.
Yeah.
We're headed for trouble because hate speech is really a very subjective sort of determination. And if I said I hate dogs. I hate dogs, Heather. I think dogs are flea bitten and da-da-da-da-da-da, right?
Yeah.
And if I paid enough attention to your Aren't Dogs Wonderful website, right? You could say theoretically, that's hate speech.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, that's obviously not the perceived intention of the law, but like, I mean, personally, I don't necessarily trust our government to like stay, to monitor themselves and stay within those types of boundaries. And so it absolutely could be perceived as hate speech, like anything and anything that is negative or, directed towards some sort of group of people or even dogs, like you said, like that could
But if somebody has a bad day and you say the wrong thing, that could be perceived as hate speech.
Yeah, absolutely.
It is, we're in this level of subjectivity now, which is not good. It's just, it's really not good. And the whole state of media in general is really bad right now. Yeah. And it's not just social media, right? So, we can break this down. You and I were talking about Gaia before we started doing this today.
Yeah. The whole controversy with David Wilcock and Corey Good and this weird letter that's floating around that's like, if this is his resignation letter, by the way, it is like 20 pages long. I tried to read it, but it's so long. Like, who writes a resignation letter like that? It's like a crazy person wrote it. Like, it's seriously so long.
Well, it's true. It's true. And, we haven't seen a lot of David Wilcock lately.
That's accurate. Yeah. So he's kind of hiding out. I mean, either because of the backlash of that, or maybe it is actually true, either way, it kind of makes sense that he kind of want to step out of the spotlight for a little bit when there's so much circulating about him. So
Gaia has had problems with their numbers for a while.
Yeah.
They're losing people. And for a brief period of time, and you and I were talking about this too, with Aquarius being the new age, and here we are at the South Node. So it's sort of like the remnants of the new age are like washing up on the beach, right? Like there was a ship that was wrecked at sea. It was the new age, and now it's washing up on shore. And Gaia had this transition of going from feel good to feel not so good, which is like truth. Like truth doesn't always feel good.
Yeah.
So they were kind of moving into that category. But even with Gaia, like they had their own kinds of governors around that. Like you couldn't really go fully into it, like, or else you lose your gig, right?
Like you did.
What happened to me?
The many tribes of Obama.
Thank you. Yeah, that's right. And so even there were limitations around, but they were playing because people are hungry. Like the new age was like cotton candy, and it just tasted so good for a while, right?
Yeah.
Well, so he just got sick of it. It's like, come on, we need some turnips and kale and broccoli or whatever. and that was like the truth, and people were very into it. But the challenge with that is that you start to go down these rabbit holes, and most of them are unresolvable. So people were getting tired of, I think, taking a pickaxe and going down. And not only that, but Gaia was losing a lot of eyeballs to YouTube.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of really great free content for like seeking the truth. And like all the things that they are trying to put on Gaia, you can very easily find very similar content all over YouTube. Like it's like
that's right.
That type of content. So you
just have to dig, know where to find it. And, so that was also contributing to their descent in terms of numbers. Mm-hmm. But I'm not there, but I can only imagine. So what Gaia had to do is they had to create something unique and specific, right? Unique content. Mm-hmm. And that's when Corey Good was born.
Interesting.
So they had something that they could build on, and people would say, oh, I want to be part of this, I want to be part of this. It's an ongoing story. It's like an echo in some ways of the QAnon stuff, disclosure. It's all kind of like entangled together. And this is all that South Node Aquarius kind of moment in time. Yeah, so they're in trouble and they're having issues.
And and going back to the social media part of it too, it's not just like Gaia on these new age platforms and all that. Facebook, ever since, even before they banned Alex Jones and all that, they were starting to have issues with their stock prices dropping because of all the censorship and what they're doing, to combat hate speech and to change the algorithms and all of that. And I heard, like, after they let Alex Jones, go and cut him off of the social media platform, that their stock actually plummeted like $2 billion. billion right after that. And so people are actually trying to leave Facebook, and they're leaving in droves. And even for me, I have, a small business that I run, and I have like 8,000 followers on Facebook on my business page. And I'm thinking about leaving because Facebook, when I wanted to change my page name for my business page, they asked me for my personal tax returns. They asked me to send them my tax returns so that way they could change the name of my business on my Facebook page. I was pretty livid about that and got into a pretty heated debate with their customer service representatives. They eventually backed down, but they still want some sort of official documentation from me with my either employee identification number or social security number on it, which is not something that I want linked to my Facebook account. And there are very many reasons why you wouldn't want that linked to your Facebook account. So,
absolutely. Yeah. Well, not only that, they want banking information now.
Yeah.
and at some point, I think the apple is already poisoned, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, people are leaving Facebook, and millennials, the younger millennials, Gen Z, they don't go to Facebook.
No, they don't. It's like my group of millennials that are still on there, but barely, right? People are
barely.
Are sick of it.
The demographic of Facebook, and God bless them, I love them, tend to be women from about 45 to about 70.
Really?
That is the bulk of the demographic for Facebook.
That's interesting, because it used to be like college students that were in my age group, because it came out when I started college, and only college students were allowed to be on Facebook. You had to have a college ID. So it was very much like a hub for young people who are of a certain age and who are of a certain like education level, right? Or a certain privilege level, or whatever you want to call that. But it was like very specific at the beginning. That's interesting that it's like the opposite now.
It's yeah, absolutely. And they're having problems. YouTube is also having issues. Yeah. Even though they have. So YouTube wants to become paid TV. That's what they want to become. YouTube wants to be able to charge you $30 a month.
Well, they have people making content for free that are either not.
But here's what they want. They want to get like cable content. They're already doing it. They have YouTube TV, right?
Yeah.
So you're seeing YouTube want to become kind of more of a traditional media provider.
That's like the whole point of YouTube is that it's not that, right? We have enough of that. And then the same thing with Facebook. They're pairing up with like CNN and I think like MSN to provide, instead of doing the trending articles, they're actually going to have CNN produce the content for you. So that way CNN can tell you what the news is. Right. If I wanted to do that, I would watch CNN, like nobody's trying to go to Facebook for that.
Exactly. They're going to be producing content for a ghost town.
Yeah.
That's what they're going to be. We're in this weird flux, right? And this brings up again some of that South Node Aquarius stuff about the economy and Uranus and Taurus. We can bring that into the discussion as well. Yeah. Because there are businesses like Uber. Uber doesn't make any profit. They don't make profit. Like Uber has, what they're banking on is the fact that they're going to innovate, and then 10 years from now, their innovations are going to be profitable, right? Most of these tech companies, I don't think Facebook is profitable. I don't think they're profitable at all. I mean, they're probably getting a huge amount of money from DARPA and the NSA so they can get in and get all this information because, DARPA built Facebook anyway. But we're looking at this weird time where like actual money and profitability is really sketchy. Super, and we're watching people cut their cable cord. They're not in, so what is cable doing? What is Netflix doing? Well, they're trying to get people to create original content like YouTube.
Yeah.
Right? So everybody's confused. Like these models are all jumbled. And this is all South Node Aquarius stuff.
Yeah.
And so the media path is becoming very, very blurry. And again, if it's tied to economy and profitability, like a lot of these other ventures are, we're just in this realm of like continued over speculation. That somewhere down the line, this thing's going to turn a profit. And that's why people are investing in it, because clearly it's not the here and now. So we're in a real cultural flux.
Yeah. I think the real issue is that the internet itself is becoming more and more centralized. And so there are actually some huge movements to decentralize the internet. And there's actually a new form of internet that's being created that my friend, a mutual friend of ours that you know, was talking to me about the other day, where it's going to be coming out actually sometime shortly after these eclipses, where it's like a decentralized internet. I can't remember what it's called. It's like the DNet or something like that, or something along those lines. But it's a decentralized internet. Everything is peer-to-peer. It's peer-to-peer music sharing, peer-to-peer videos, peer-to-peer everything. And there's no web hosting. So you don't, because that always kind of bothered me. I'm like, who am I paying for? Like, why do you own this website? I don't get it. Like, that's the thing that kind of bothers me, is like the web hosting thing. I mean, it's not that expensive, but it's like, I don't understand it, right? And so this is kind of like the internet being reborn, fresh start, you know, clean slate. It's the Wild West again. So if this actually happens, I feel like a lot of people, especially maybe in our circles, you know, in particular, would be interested in actually jumping on board with this.
Right. So just for people who don't understand it, basically what happens is that every computer has a client on it, and every computer basically becomes a node in a network.
Yeah.
And that network is a decentralized network. So there's no starting point, there's no end point. It's all connected to basically a series of permissions. And those permissions are based on sharing, right? Sharing data, sharing space, sharing bytes. You know, it's the I don't know if you ever watch the HBO series Silicon Valley. You ever watch that?
No.
It's very funny. But it's what they talk about in Silicon Valley. And it's this whole idea that there is no internet.
Yeah.
And yet everything is the internet. And I think it'd be great. I mean, you have to like have a series of protocols where, you know, this whole notion of a firewall and protection, and because you're basically sharing your computer with the rest of the world.
Yeah.
That's what happens. And you're kind of doing it anyway. In some ways, right?
Yeah.
you may as well, you know, see if you can evolve into something interesting. But I wanted to get back to this other piece around like this, the true node in Leo and the south node in Aquarius, and we'll jump into the eclipse.
Yeah.
One of the things that you and I were talking about was this process of egoification.
Okay, yeah.
And how, like, there's this information coming out now about QAnon. And that there seems to be some real like smoking gun evidence of the people who are running the Q program. And this guy, Isaac Green from Anti-School, just did a webcast on it, a YouTube on it. And if you look at all the energy that was put into this QAnon, like people were like, and not just anybody, we're talking moms and dads and kids, and they're showing up at Trump rallies with Q T-shirts on. It's a really big deal.
Yeah.
And these people are waking up, which is good in its own right, right? But it's become attached to what I think is probably one of the biggest LARPs of all time. And what happens is like there's this process of transference and egoification. Leo, right? Leo, we want kings, we want queens, we want heroes. You know, we want the savior with Leo.
Yeah.
And then here's that south node in Aquarius.
Wow.
It's like, you know, it's like, okay, you know, it's meet the new boss, same as the old boss kind of a deal. So that's going on. And
that's interesting. And
there are a lot of people who became very popular very quickly because QAnon hit the scene in October of last year. Mm-hmm. I think it was October 24th last year, 25th. So we're not even talking like a whole year. I mean, you know, basically 7 months, 8 months.
Yeah.
Right? 10 months. And there are a lot of people like Praying Medic and, you know, Just Informed Talk, this woman, Liz Crokin, Tracy Beans. I mean, they became like overnight sensations, huge followings. Jordan Sather, huge followings. And if this turns out to be true, then what happens with these people? Like, where does their credibility go?
Yeah.
How do they salvage, whatever wreckage that they're dealing with as a result of this egoification?
That's so interesting. And you know what else is interesting? Because this also ties back to the Corey Good, David Wilcock thing, because it's that process of like wanting to find that savior who's going to take us out of the situation with these like blue avian things. Regardless of what you believe about it, like the rhetoric seems to be like, okay, these aliens are going to show up, they're going to help us, we're going to ascend, and then everything will be okay. And so that's unraveling at the same time. So there's like, it's interesting. There is this sort of energy of people looking to some sort of guidance or some sort of king or some sort of leader who's going to help pull us out of this, situation that we're in, that everybody can agree right now that, the world as it stands and the structures and the powers that be, everything that's going on right now, it's not working for us anymore, right? And so instead of taking it upon ourselves, many people are kind of looking towards somebody else, like, okay, who's going to help us here? But I think this eclipse might actually change some of that, because I think part of that is empowering yourself to be courageous and to be a leader in your own life, right? That's a big part of the North Node in Leo, is coming into that role of leadership, coming into that role of being your own king, right? Being your own leader and being courageous. Leo rules courage. It's the lion, right? And so it's doing it courageously and authentically and not caring about what other people think about what you're doing, because that's the South Node in Aquarius. Aquarius is the hive mind. It's not like as free thinking and, revolutionary as people might think, because it cares more about the collective and the collective idea than it does about the individual ego and the individual self-expression. The individual can express itself so long as it's okay with the group, right? And that's Aquarius. And so it's about doing this and leading your own life, paving a way, but doing it in a way that's authentic to yourself, that's courageous, and not caring about, the collective so much and what they think about what it is that you're trying to put out there.
Yeah, I think you really hit the nail on the head. Aquarius is such a paradoxical sign in that it wants to be a real individual,
yeah,
but at the same time wants to be part of something bigger than itself. And that's where it gets into kind of this self-destructive modality, because there is a self-destruct button inside of Aquarius, right? Like if it gets too close to being part of this collective, it'll go all Uranian. Say, well, I don't really want to be a part of the collective. I want to be an individual.
Yeah.
Right? If it goes too far into the individual, no, I don't want to be an individual. I want to be more part of the collective.
Yeah.
And I love Aquarius. Don't get me wrong. It's a fascinating sign. But it's one of those things that's, the sun's in its fall in Aquarius, right? I mean, it's in its fall.
Yeah,
right?
It doesn't do so well there.
Yeah, so this is going to be a very interesting time. And I think a lot of unmasking is going to take place.
Mm-hmm.
So let's talk about these three eclipses. Let's go back to the first one.
Okay. So
that we had on the 12th.
That first one was the one that was at 20 degrees in Cancer, and that was sort of the precursor to the eclipses that are going to be happening on that Cancer Capricorn axis, especially in 2019. And so, yeah, that one was kind of a big one. And what you predicted was that Trump would have a hard time with this. And like around that eclipse, like almost, I think to the day, even like that week, there were protests in London when he was visiting England. And so he couldn't even go there, or he chose not to go there, supposedly. And so that was something that came to fruition. So I thought that was really interesting, actually.
Well, the big news after that eclipse was the Israel piece.
Yes, that too, because we talked about that. And with that Star of David formation that was happening.
It was the Star of David, and it was the 1,948 years from the first sounding of the Shoah, which took place on July 12th on 70 AD, which was the collapse of the Second Temple, right? Mm-hmm. And just days after that, we talked about this, and just days after that, Israel passed a law which basically said, hey, we are a full-on nationalistic state. For all intents and purposes, they declared that they're a fascistic government and that they don't have to recognize the rights of any group.
Wow.
And that came out like just days after that. It's like, holy smokes. That was big news, right?
Mm-hmm.
But what was your experience like around the energy of that first eclipse? I'd be curious.
Well, this was the first of many eclipses that were going to be happening near my moon and Venus. And so the experience with that was a very strong, for me personally, on a personal level, was a very strong urge to uproot and, think about leaving the desert because it's in my ninth house too of, long distance travel and moon in the ninth house and that kind of thing. Like that's a long distance.
In water too. You're not in a place that's near any water, right?
And yes, that's literally the reason, because we're so sick of being hot and dry and there's no water. So that I thought was kind of interesting. But what I've been noticing is that I've been getting a lot of clients, especially as we got to the buildup of that like middle eclipse that happened, where there was that T-square going on with Mars conjunct the South Node square Uranus, where it was really intense. It was like everybody was in chaos, and I've never had so many people reaching out wanting readings immediately, like right now. And I'm still backed up on readings from that eclipse because so many people, even my friends, like almost all of my friends, reach out to me individually to ask for readings or to ask for like astrological sort of guidance, because everybody's in flux, everybody's in change. It's not like it's happening all right away though. What I've noticed is that there's this, like we were talking about before when I texted you that one day, it's like this energy of needing to be patient because we have Mars in retrograde, we have Mercury in retrograde, change is coming, and there's this huge, intense energy of frustration that was building around that time with status quo, right? That's what Uranus does, and that's what the eclipses does. It breaks us free from like anything that's stagnant, stuck, that's holding us back, and that's just restrictive. And it's like it was weighing on everybody so much more than normal, and everybody just felt like they needed to change something right now. And the thing that I was coming across is that I saw that a lot of people needed to change things when I was looking at their charts, but I saw the results of this not coming until September, October, sometimes not until January, February of next year. These are like long-term changes that are being initiated right now. And especially with the retrogrades, people need to be patient. And so that was a big energy that I was noticing with these eclipses.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So for me, the first eclipse was great. Loved it.
Yeah.
I did it. Yeah. So I did a night with like 7 women, like Cancer, right? 7 women doing tarot, doing astrology. It was great. I felt like the court vizier. So that eclipse was cool. The last eclipse that we had, that one really threw me for a loop. Energetically, I was just spent. Mm-hmm. I was exhausted with that eclipse. And so, I'm trying to see if there's like a pattern here, kind of like a wave pattern. Mm-hmm. So we're dealing, and most of these eclipse cycles usually have 2 eclipses associated with it. Yeah. Sometimes 3.
This one we have 3.
We're on with 3. So I think that first eclipse set the stage for something.
Yes. I think it set the stage for something very long term, especially because it was like that first eclipse in a long series of eclipses on that axis. So right. I think the results are going to come like much later, but that one did feel good. You're right. It was like good. Like I had all these revelations about things, but it was like, it felt really good.
I felt great that weekend. It's like, eclipse from eclipse, this is great, right?
Eclipse. No,
I'm loving it. Bring it on. So it's like, next one. The eclipse after that one just blew my head.
Yeah.
Because I just felt like that whole weekend, I was like making these wasted journeys, these things that didn't like pan out. There was no, it's like, okay, I'm gonna go out to the end of this branch and I'm gonna grab this, nice apple, but it's not there. And that whole weekend was like that. And that set up for me this whole kind of life script about, journeys, wasted journeys, pieces that aren't being fulfilled. I mean, I was in a pretty existential place that weekend.
Wow.
And then I came out of it that night when I did on Sunday night where I did the show, which was the live stream, which is great. So I felt like that second eclipse for me was about some level of deconstruction. Mm-hmm. Is that something that you experienced with that eclipse to some degree?
Absolutely. It was like a deconstruction, a letting go, like a breaking down of like old paradigms. And it was also like how you were saying the wasted journeys thing. I didn't even think about that, but that it was my experience also. So I think you're definitely onto something with that. It was like I had all these big plans and great ideas and I started moving in these directions and I was like, a week later, I'm like, I can't, this is not working, right? All these things that I was moving into, even very literally, my husband and I, you know, Matt, we went on a journey to Flagstaff to like go on all these hikes and stuff with the dogs. And it like did not pan out. It was like a whole waste of a day that we drove all the way out there for like literally no reason. It was very literal.
Yeah, I think Mercury retrograde in Leo had something to do with that.
Yeah.
It was definitely kind of in that mix. Okay, so if we look at that first eclipse as kind of setting the stage, there's, you know, I like to think of that first eclipse of being Cancerian womb-like in some ways.
It was like an incubator for something.
It felt very incubational, absolutely. And then the second phase is like, you know, it's right? Get out of here, enough, you know. So now we've got this third stage, which could theoretically be about some level of integration.
That's what I think. I think it's an integration, but also a reset, because this is the last eclipse in Leo we've been having. If you think about it, we've been having all these eclipses in Leo, and we've been starting all these things and having these big transformative experiences, moving in new directions, especially if you have this triggering important points in your chart, as I have. And so it's like moving in a new direction. But when you're talking about the North Node is like obsession. It's like getting really excited and jumping in too hard, too fast, because this is something you've never done before and you don't know how to regulate the energy. And so something that I've been thinking about and talking about a little bit is that this is sort of like a reset. If you've gone way too hard, way too fast, and you've overdone it in this area that's being affected by the eclipse, now is a time when you're going to have that moment of like, it's going to come back at you and you need to do something. You need to, you know, again, that's the deconstruction part of it as well. But yeah, so it's like integrating what you've done so far and all of the change that you've made and all this transformation. But at the same time, it's looking at like, okay, where did I take it a little too far, right? Where has this gone overboard in one way or another? Because that's Leo in general is dramatic, you know, over the top, and the North Node is going to amplify that times like 20.
Yeah, absolutely. You want to talk about the inconjuncts?
I do want to talk about I love inconjuncts. People who have had readings with me know that I'm obsessed with doing inconjunctions. But yeah, what's your take on, so we have a yod forming. First off,
it's a total yod. It's a total yod going on.
Well, absolutely. It's a yod, and it's like the eclipse conjunct Mercury retrograde too, pretty close, like 4 degrees. And then we have this intense yod with Pluto and Neptune. Pluto and Neptune is the strongest. And Pluto in a yod or in an inconjunction is super intense, because when you think about Pluto in an inconjunctions, what I found, I don't know if you find something similar, is that it's either an overexpression of the energy of the planet or a repression of the energy of the planet. And if you're repressing the energy of that planet, when it's activated, it explodes out of you. Mm-hmm. And so when you think about Pluto, it's over concern with power and control, over concern with certainty and wanting to figure out what's going to happen next, wanting to figure out everybody's like psychology and like learning about them on that psychological level, so you can put them in this like little box so you can figure out what their motivations are, right? So you can figure out how to use, you know, your power and their power in a way that's beneficial to you. And a lot of the Pluto in conjunction people that I work with, they have a difficulty with uncertainty and a difficulty with surrendering and letting go of that need for certainty. And I think that that's what people are going to be struggling with, because this is a reset and a new beginning, but people want to know what's going to happen next, and they're not going to be able to know that. And that's going to cause a lot of distress for a lot of people. And it's more so than normal, because there's this like psychological and emotional like attachment to the way you want things to turn out. And it's really intense right now. And I'm feeling that with my clients for sure. And I've been, you know, trying to let go and dealing with that as well. And so I think that that's going to be a hallmark on an individual level of the eclipse. But I'm interested to hear what you think about that, and then the collective level, because you're much better with like the mundane astrology than I am.
Well, I think you're right. You know, I love inconjuncts too. And for me, the inconjunct represents a mystery. Like, how do these two planets, you know, or these two signs relate when they don't relate at all?
Exactly, yeah.
And I find that to be kind of a fascinating sort of exploration and journey from one point to the other. And I've often associated an inconjunct with being similar to a lunar aspect in some ways. And there are other astrologers who may disagree with that, but this is just my take on it. Mm-hmm. And it's almost like it's like being out in the night or in the woods during a new moon, and it's dark. And you've got to get from one point to another, and you don't really know how to get there in some ways.
Yeah.
But you've got to put one foot in front of the other, right? And you have to trust your instinct and your intuition to move into areas that you're uncomfortable with.
Yes, yes.
So it's, you know, one of the metaphors that I like to use for the inconjunct is from that movie, The X-Men, where Professor Rex sits in that like hub. You know, have you seen the movie? He sits in this hub, and he puts this giant hat on with all these electrodes, and he gets to like see what all the mutants in the world are doing. But in order to get to where he's sitting, you've got to come to the edge of like the X-Men's like basement, right? Where this thing is. And you have to literally step out onto air. And the little metal platform comes out. And you make another step and another little metal platform. So to me, that's like the inconjunct. You have to step off into air. Mm-hmm. And every step is, you know, and then you get to the other side, and it's like, wow, this is interesting. And you know, it's like eureka, I've kind of found something. But it's not easy. It is. A lot of people don't make that journey with an inconjunct.
No, they don't. And I get two types of clients with the inconjunctions. Clients that have been able to work with that energy and use the talents and to integrate those two energies that don't necessarily connect well. And then others who don't even realize that they have these patterns that they're holding on to. And so it is like walking around in the dark, like in the moonlight or whatever you're saying, because it's like there's a lack of awareness a lot of the time until somebody points it out or until they do some introspective work and they realize like, hey, I'm trying to force these things to sort of integrate, and it doesn't work this way. I have to go and do a more indirect way of connecting these energies, which is the way, I think the best way to deal with the inconjunctions is to deal with them more indirectly, if that makes sense.
No, it does make sense. Does make sense. You know, it's like if you want to become a good cook, maybe learn how to paint or something like that. You know?
Yeah, or like food photography.
Food photography,
right. Beautiful food. I don't know, something, but yeah, or just eat food and taste it, and then you'll learn how to cook from that. Right?
Yeah, I mean, I think we're getting closer to it. You know, and so we're dealing with Pluto.
Yes, and Neptune, which is
Neptune. So one is power and death and intensity and fixity, right?
Obsession.
And that's in Capricorn. So we're dealing with, you know, hierarchies.
Yeah.
Businesses, governments. And then Neptune in Pisces, which is, boy, you know, it's a lot. But I keep thinking that, again, we're dealing with children, this Neptunian thing. You know, Hollywood is, I think, ruled by Pisces.
Yeah, it is. Film. Yeah.
Absolutely. And so, you know, there's like, okay, what's going on over here? There's something here, right?
Yeah.
With these kids and Pisces and Neptune.
Wow.
But it's not clear and it's not direct. You know, we have to kind of feel into this thing, right? Mm-hmm. And then Pluto in Capricorn, I really feel like that's like bureaucracies and corporations and power brokers and power dealers that want to hold on to their elite status with Leo.
Yeah.
That's what it feels like.
Absolutely.
And I think something's going to come out of this eclipse. It's going to jar some of these things loose.
That makes a lot of sense. And especially with what we were talking about with the social media, these big, like giant corporations that now own like everything, you know, all at once in terms of like the media. And, you know, Leo has an association, not just with, like children and this and that. It has an association with actors, you know, and performers
Absolutely.
of all kinds. And so there is an association with the media with that too. So I think that could be something that comes out.
And sports, and also, you know, to some degree, sports performers, right?
Yeah. And politicians too are actually associated with like Leo and the fifth house and, you know, all of that because they're like the king, right? They're like the leader.
To some degree, you're right. Yeah. You know who's got to be careful? I think Trump's got to be careful with this eclipse.
Yeah. He's got
because he has his true node in Leo. And it's in his 12th house.
Oh, yeah.
So that could be exposing, right? Expository.
Mm-hmm.
You know, also, you know, he's got his own kid, right?
Mm-hmm.
Baron.
Multiple kids.
Well, I'm thinking Baron because Baron's the one that sounds the most like a king, right?
Yeah, that's true.
Dude, he's got a weird chart, that kid. He's born 29 Pisces.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Interesting.
He has the same birthday as Harvey Weinstein.
He's got like almost an equinox chart.
Yeah, he's an interesting kid. I mean, you can see that he's different.
Yeah.
He's different in the chart. I think Trump needs to be careful during this eclipse. And he's already overstepped his boundaries a little bit. You can even tell, like, his supporters, people who are ardently Trump supporters, are getting tired of his mendacious tweets.
Yeah. Yeah.
You're like, did he really have to go after LeBron James? Doesn't he have better things to do?
And
right?
At that point, you know, that means that pretty much everyone's tired of hearing about him because everyone who's like not in support of him, they're kind of getting sick of hearing about it. And that's actually some of the feedback I got from our last video. Some people just didn't want to hear Trump's name or didn't want to hear about politics because they're just sick of it. Everybody's burnt out on all of this just nonsense. It's like a big like show that's going on that's just in your face all of the time. And I think people are kind of, they're kind of done with that too.
Well, it feels very, very vampiric.
Oh my God, Pluto in conjunction people, they tend to draw in these people that are very vampiric into their lives. So that's like a key word that I found with these Pluto in conjunctions is that vampiric energy where you don't even realize you're being manipulated until it's a little too late. And usually it's on a psychic energetic level.
Yeah, the thing with politics is that it can give you an interesting rush for a while. Mm-hmm. You know, if you start to, you know, deconstruct things and, you know, but ultimately you find out, well, where is this really going?
Yeah.
There have been people that have been deconstructing politics for a very long time. Like YouTube is a treasure trove of people that have been doing research for like Anthony Sutton. Like, you know, his stuff is really, you know, starts to break in the 70s and the 80s. It's, you know, you watch Sutton, he's like, you know, pretty much all you need to know and learn. He's an Aquarius, by the way. So you can see that there have been, you know, people have been, you know, we're like standing on the shoulders of giants as we try to deconstruct things.
Yeah.
But obviously, we're at a time now where we have this thing called the internet, and they didn't have it then. And so now everything is just quantum, right? And so there's the potential for learning things really, really quickly, mm-hmm. and getting indoctrinated really quickly. And I think we're also in a major cycle of burnout because everything is 24/7, you know, right, left paradigm, you know, smashing any kind of hope or ability for us to, like, you know, pull together. Right.
Yeah, divide and conquer, and everyone's triggered by everything, so nobody can talk about anything, even if it's relevant and good content and good information. Like, people have been programmed to be instantly triggered talking about politics, no matter what, even if you're talking about it gently and in like a sort of objective, you know, sort of point of view where it's not very opinionated. People still, as soon as they hear Donald Trump's name, a lot of people are triggered. And it's gotten to that point. And I'm personally just burnt out on it. I know a lot of people are burnt out on it because it's like 24/7. Everyone's arguing and nobody wants to listen to anybody else. Nothing's getting accomplished. They've definitely accomplished their divide and conquer strategy that I know that that's what they've been trying to do for a very long time.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, the only thing that would change it would be some kind of, you know, third party threat, whatever that is. We'd have to all pull together, right? War, aliens, whatever. Did you want to talk about this training center that they found in New Mexico. Did you want to talk about that?
Yeah, that's interesting. Let's talk about that. And then let's lead into Mercury stationing direct, because I looked up some stuff about that, and Mars stationing direct and some of the other stuff that's going on this month. But yeah, like it's interesting because that training center, or that like compound in New Mexico, it just came out yesterday, right? Am I wrong about that?
Oh, that's 2 days ago. Yeah.
2 days ago, and we're on the precipice of this huge like solar lunar eclipse new moon with this really intense yod that we were just talking about in Leo, which rules children. And this comes out that there are these children that are being starved and abused in this compound in Mexico. And yeah.
Well, it's not just because they wanted to take kids out and starve and abuse them. These apparently were like hardcore radical Muslims. And I'm not I don't peddle Islamophobia, it's like, whatever, they're going to practice what they practice. It's not my religion, right? Then again, not most religions aren't my religion anyway.
Yeah.
For me, the hang up is the Sharia law thing. If you're going to be in a country, boom, it's their law, their country, right? You basically drop your Sharia law because of where you are. That's just me.
Mm-hmm.
Right? If you're going to be there, whatever, it doesn't matter. Noahide law, Sharia law, frickin' gypsy law, you're in a country. Practice the law of that country, right? Bottom line. You get the benefits from that country, you may as well practice the law there. So these guys were hardcore radical Muslims, and they were training their kids to be, quote unquote, soldiers. Some people might call them terrorists, right? That's what was going on there. So maybe this leads into this kind of Pluto-Neptune in conjunct with the real stuff. It's like, no, how did they get there? And where did they get the money? And who's funding them, right? I mean, there's a rabbit hole there. And so what were they trying to, pull off here?
Yeah, it feels like there's going to be like a conspiracy rabbit hole too, because it's like that Neptunian energy where there's a lot of confusion and illusion, and sort of it's very difficult to piece together what's actually going on and why. It's like very confusing, because you're right. It's like, how did this happen? Why?
And this is going to be very interesting to watch both the mainstream media and even to some degree, the not so mainstream media, how they deal with this, because number one, they're Muslim, and number two, if I'm not mistaken, they are Black African Americans, right? So it's just like, okay, you got rails here, you got third rails that you're stepping on, right? So this is going to be interesting to see how this plays out. And my final piece, and we'll get to the Mercury stuff here. I really do feel like, whether people want to hear this or not, that we are in the midst of a conflict. Mm-hmm. And it's because the divide and conquer has been set up in such a way, and both sides have been weaponized. And there are, also third-party kind of tangential players that are coming in and being a part of this whole thing, whether it's Israel, whether it's China, whether it's Russia. There are other forces now that are colluding in this kind of maelstrom of chaos and divide and conquer that's been set up here. And I think it's important for people to understand that.
Yeah.
And to try to stay I wouldn't say stay neutral, because everybody's going to have an opinion, and everybody's going to have a filter, and everybody's going to have a perspective, right? But to try to stay as mindful as to what's going on as possible, so that we don't get swept up as much as on the emotional side.
Yeah.
And clearly we can make choices and have, perceptions that allow us to kind of interact with the material in a more lucid way. Mm-hmm. But I would say pump the brakes on the emotional stuff a little bit.
Yeah. And so can we do one more thing then before we move on to the Mercury and all that? Because that's kind of a good segue into what can we do with this eclipse energy? Because we're talking about all the difficulties and all the problems that are coming up and things like that. So what do we do on an individual and collective level with this eclipse energy in order to harness it in a way that's positive and that's beneficial, and that actually helps us to move forward in a way that's good for us, right?
Yeah. Well, I think you look to Leo. It's like, what did you do when you were a kid?
Yeah.
What did you love? What got you excited? Can we even allow ourselves to be excited these days?
Yeah.
Right? It's like, oh, yeah, well, I'm going to have some fun today, but I know that the world is a shit show. No, go have fun.
Yeah. I think
Right?
that's a good thing to do on the Leo eclipse. Do something fun and childlike and harness that energy and use that as your sort of intention for the lunar month ahead and that eclipse
Yeah,
energy.
totally.
I like that. Okay.
Yeah. And for you, it's waking up and sleeping with a pool of puppies.
Yeah, I put that on your thing. I do that. I mean, our dogs, man, they're awesome. They like tackle me in the morning, and I have like a pile of puppies on me, and then I do yoga right after, and then they tackle me while I do yoga. So I'm essentially just like playing with them instead of doing yoga.
So you do doga. You do
Yeah.
doga.
I have one like licking my face, and the other one like slamming into me and knocking me over while I'm in downward dog. It's great, very
Love it.
productive.
That's awesome.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's get into Mercury retrograde then, because Mercury is stationing to go direct finally on the 18th. And I know a lot of people are always looking forward to Mercury going direct after a long, hard retrograde period, especially while Mars is retrograde and we have eclipses going on. And so kind of the thing that I brought up before was that it's stationing at 11 degrees 32 minutes in Leo. We actually had a total blood moon lunar eclipse at 11 degrees 37 minutes in Leo, so almost exact to the minute, back on January 31st of 2018. And so I looked at the visibility of this eclipse because I thought that with Mercury retrograding and stationing on this point, it's activating that eclipse again, and it's revisiting something with that, right? And so I wanted to see where it was visible and what happened. And so it was very visible in North and South Korea, parts of Russia, Alaska, which had earthquakes and tsunamis around that time, and a little bit in Australia, but it's primarily in like North and South Korea, Japan, like that sort of areas where it was the center of the longest point of seeing that eclipse in the totality. And so what I mentioned before was that whole 2-month period, there was a lot of action with North and South Korea, but it was positive. We had Kim Jong-un, who announced that North Korea was thinking about participating in the 2018 Winter Olympics that happened on January 1st. And then that was confirmed that it was actually going to happen on January 20th, so just, 11 days before the eclipse. And then just after the eclipse on February 9th, North and South Korea, the athletes for the Winter Games marched together under the Korean unification flag. So that was a symbol of them working together and coming together. And I think that was the beginning of North and South Korea and their like peace talks and all those types of things. So that was initiated under this eclipse. And it was actually a very positive sort of manifestation of the energy, especially with the North Node. It's about moving forward, right? And
Yeah. Yeah, it's really interesting because there was so much good energy around that time.
Mm-hmm.
And it felt like, wow, I mean, North Korea has been this weird kind of shadowy, dark puppet state for such a long time. And now, it seems like they're changing their tune a little bit. And, the younger guy in charge, he's actually a millennial. And let's make a reunification process start to happen, and then Trump goes to Indonesia, right, and meets with Kim Jong Un, and now all that momentum has gone away.
Yeah.
Now they're talking about more sanctions, and I mean I don't know how many more sanctions they can put on them. Apparently, North Korea is not denuclearizing. They're still building ICBMs. Pompeo went there probably about a month ago, and all Kim Jong-un did was like eat potatoes in front of him. Like he barely even acknowledged him, right? So a lot of that really, really good energy momentum has just kind of fizzled. And I wonder if there's going to be some, move to like rekindle it, or if the energy is going to flip and go in another direction. I don't know, but it's not moving in the way that I think they had wanted it to. Now, apparently, China's been interfering. There's been some Russian interference, and maybe even some interference inside the CIA who hate Trump.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe that's why some of this stuff has gone sideways or even retrograde. It'll be interesting to see what happens with them over the next few weeks to see if maybe they can recapture some of that momentum. Who knows?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that something should come up around that with the activation of that eclipse point. And I mean, some of the other players too, in terms of like who saw the eclipse in the totality, I mean, there could be sort of something that was maybe initiated around that time that never came to fruition, and maybe it'll come back out and come back around. So, you know, there could be events in Australia, there could be events in Russia involving Russia, China, Japan. Who else was involved in that? I mean, Alaska had it in the totality, parts of Canada. So like that whole sort of region there. I mean, there could be stuff that comes back around that we didn't even know about the first time that maybe was going on behind the scenes.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And then there's also the potential for some physical stuff too.
Yeah.
In terms of tectonic shifts and ring of fire and all that.
That's true too. Hopefully that's not what happens, but
no, we never want that.
Yeah, but so Mercury stations to go direct on the 18th, so that's good news for everybody who has been having a lot of Mercury retrograde difficulties. You can start signing contracts. Well, maybe not yet. Mars is still retrograde, but you can start thinking about it and getting your ducks in a row and moving forward, you know, with certain things. And there's going to be some forward momentum, I think, this month, especially with this solar eclipse and this like reset going on. And then Mars will be stationing too to go direct. But before that happens, Jupiter will trine Neptune exact for the final time. What are your thoughts about that?
Well, you know, I think that's one of those energies that can be, like, if you're not paying attention, you might miss it. I think if you're too focused on outcomes or you're too focused on the shit show, you might miss a real opportunity to kind of ride a higher level of consciousness and getting into some really basic and fundamental spiritual values like forgiveness and charity and kindness. In Scorpio, I actually think Scorpio is a very healing sign.
Mm-hmm,
and regenerating, repairing, and forgiving. I mean, you know, Scorpio is also fixed. You're dealing with fixed, immutable energy. You know, the mutability of Pisces and the fixity of Scorpio. I think it could be a really deep and profound energy, but if you're not paying attention, you might, I mean, that's the way these things with Jupiter happen, right?
mm-hmm.
Like you could have, I mean, people are always going to go through an interesting Jupiter transit at some point, you know, over the course of a year. Then it doesn't last long. It'll last maybe 12 days. And you may feel really, really good during those 12 days.
Mm-hmm.
And life may offer you a bone or two. Oh, yeah, great. I miss it, right? I mean,
yeah, because
that's the nature of it.
It makes you a little lazy.
Yeah, you just take it for granted. I'll always be there.
Yeah.
But I feel like that's what it feels like for me. That if you're not paying attention, you could kind of miss it. If you're too focused on outcome, if you're too focused on the shit show, you might miss an opportunity to go deeper and have some real healing in your life.
Yeah, because I mean, and it is in the water signs too, so it's going to be a little bit more emotional and internalized. It's not going to be as overt as it could be, and especially with Jupiter and Neptune, like those two planets are associated with like laziness and escapism and being a little unrealistic and all of that. So it could be, you know, that people just kind of kick back. They feel good that day, or they feel really lazy, and they don't get to utilize that energy because they're not actively engaging with it.
Well, even that might be okay, right? As long as you're aware of it.
Yeah, that's true. And maybe you need it. I think we all need a good break, a good Jupiter-Neptune vacation right now.
Well, you and I are a couple of Virgos, right? We're always trying to like look at the, you know, like the usefulness of something.
Exactly.
And I think that's okay, right? But the most useful thing might be, you know, laying by a lake.
Yeah.
Or you know, 3 or 4 days. But if you're aware of it, see, that's where it comes into play. like if you're aware of that experience versus just kind of taking it for granted. Like if you have 4 days and you get to sit by, a lake and you got a hammock, like be grateful for that.
Yeah.
Get on your hands and knees and say, thank you, God, or goddess or whatever, right? And because that's where you become aware of it. And when you become aware of those energies, they don't stop there, right? It's like, oh, you're aware of this experience now? Oh, great. Well, guess what? There's more.
Yeah.
And you're like, oh, wow. I'm aware of this now. Oh my God, I'm so grateful. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Well, guess what? There's more, right? So this is where it gets really good. And if we can do that, and I think we can take advantage of some of that. So I like this story. I've been thinking about this for the last couple of days. Quick little story. This guy, Kenny Stabler, who used to play for the Oakland Raiders. He was known as the Snake. And he was a freaking character. Like this guy was a party animal. He would stay out all night. And I used to live in the Bay Area. I know stories about the guy. He's infamous. And he had a great career. I'm not sure if he's in the Hall of Fame or not. He had a great career. He could have played longer, didn't take care of his body. And he went through a bunch of marriages. Post-football for Kenny was not easy. And at one point, he lived down in Alabama, like by Muscle Shoals, down there, that area. So he'd get up in the morning and he'd walk down to the Gulf because he had a place in the Gulf. He'd take his coffee down there. He'd get up in the sun and sip his coffee. He'd do this every single day. And he told this guy who was a friend of ex-player, he said, I think I figured out this God thing. And he goes, really? What is it? He says, I think God just wants us to be aware, right? God just wants us to be conscious of everything.
Yeah.
Because when that happens, then you become aware of the totality of like creation, right? And I think that's like, and he did not live much longer after that, by the way. Like he got it. He had to go down to that ocean every single day. Right. And just, 12 house that thing. And he figured, and I think that there's something to that. And maybe that could be like a story that people can, take with them as we move into this Jupiter-Neptune trine.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a really nice story.
Good story. Yeah.
And it fits. So that makes a lot of sense. So Jupiter trine Neptune, take some time for yourself, separate yourself, do some contemplation, pay attention to dreams, messages, like things like that, impressions that you get, because that's, very Neptunian. Maybe do something creative with your time on that day. Or that week, really. That's going to be a strong influence for at least that whole week, if not a little bit longer. So I think that's really nice. Jupiter is trining Neptune. That's on the 19th, which is the day after Mercury stations direct. So maybe that's like, okay, Mercury is direct now. It's a relief. Let's just relax.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's going on. And then the last big thing that's really happening this month is that Mars, actually there's a couple things, but we'll focus on Mars stationing to go direct. It's stationing to go direct at 28 degrees in Capricorn. And this is going to be at the same. Actually, this is a different day. So let's talk about that and then Saturn stationing, because that's actually happening this lunar month too. And we'll do these kind of briefly because I know we're running a little bit longer now. So Mars stationing direct in Capricorn, it's stationed to go retrograde in Aquarius. And the things that I noticed around that time, I don't know what you noticed going on around that week, were that the thing with like the immigration and the children being separated from their parents, that was like a really heated sort of thing in the media around the time that Mars was stationing. It was like a whole lot of uproar about it. And then after Mars started moving full force retrograde, we didn't really hear so much about that anymore. People like moved on to something else. And I'm wondering if so it's stationed to retrograde in Aquarius. Now it's stationed to go direct in Capricorn. I'm wondering if it's going to be like some sort of governmental intervention to like this sort of issue that might come back around or come up because of what happened when it was stationing retrograde.
It could. Theoretically it could. That was such a fascinating period. people got radical, right? It was like, let's get radical. Mars in Aquarius. This is so important. And then as it went backwards, it was like, well, the energy just went away from it.
Yeah, it's like it fizzled out.
Onto something else. It's just one of those, weird cycles that we seem to be in with this Mars retrograde, like this Isaac Cappy guy. Mars went retrograde right over his Mercury in his chart. And then this is the guy that came out with the Spielberg stuff. And it's all third-hand material, right? He did not sleep with Steven Spielberg when he was 5 years old. Like, he is not an experiencer or a victim. He got turned on to the dark side of Hollywood through Seth Green, who was his friend. And Seth Green made a lot of offhand comments about children because they would hang out a lot. And you look at Seth Green and his wife Claire's Instagram and stuff, it's creepy. It's like typical Hollywood creepy shit.
Yeah.
But that's when Isaac Cappy blew up. It was when Mars went over it was the beginning of it, the precursor of it. It went over his Mercury, which is at 9 degrees Aquarius. And that's a classic example of somebody sprouting out of nowhere like a freaking mushroom, right, due to astrology.
Yeah.
We could make a case. We could build a case on that guy alone.
Yeah.
So I don't know where this is going to go at 28 degrees Capricorn. It's right at the end of Capricorn. It feels more, to me, it feels like more of, I don't know, an attack or kind of, aggression towards the government. That's what it feels like. Mm-hmm. It feels aggressive, right? And it picks up momentum in Aquarius. And so we're going to revisit that point at 9 degrees again with the kids again. Mm-hmm. So that'll be interesting to keep an eye on.
Yeah, well. Definitely. Especially when it comes back around. That'll probably come back around. That's going to come back around at the end of the Mars retrograde shadow. So that'd be like October 9th is when it's going to hit that 9 degrees again. So that is probably when that's going to come back around.
So you bring up a really good point here about the midterms. Because the midterm, so when Trump was elected, Mars was at 29 Aquarius. So we're coming up on the Mars return of the midterms, of the election, right around the midterms. It won't be exact, but it's going to be close. Mm-hmm. So that brings up a lot of energy, right? We're coming into this really intense electional cycle. And if you think things are hot now, if you think things are divide and conquer now, when you and I get back together in September or October, mm-hmm. we'll have a lot to talk about.
Yeah, absolutely. So that'll be kind of an interesting thing to look out for. And then this month too, there's one last thing I'd like to end on because I think this is a positive thing.
Okay, I'm going to give you one. There's one other piece here we haven't talked about. I just got to slip it in.
Okay.
Apparently, and this might actually work on your end. Your idea about the government doing something. Apparently, Trump's trump card around the midterms is he's going to bring the troops home from Afghanistan. That's what I've heard.
Really?
That's what I've heard.
Interesting.
That it's going to be a big deal. And if that happens, then he'll be almost canonized as being the president that ended the Afghan war, or you know what I mean. And this started right after 9/11, like less than a month after 9/11, we were in Afghanistan. So that'll be interesting to watch.
Yeah, it'll be 7 years anniversary of the Saturn first quarter square of Saturn since 9/11.
Yeah.
Or no, that's not right. I'm thinking 2011. It's 17 years. Jesus.
It's been a while.
It's been way long. That's insanity.
So anyway, that could be Mars direct.
Okay.
Yeah. So file that away. Okay, what were you going to say?
So the last thing that's going to be happening this lunar month that I think is really interesting is that Saturn on September 6th, which is my birthday, Saturn's going to station to go direct at 2 degrees in Capricorn, and Mercury at that time will be forming actually a grand trine with Uranus and Saturn, because Uranus and Saturn will be hitting its closest point to that trine.
Right.
It has been already there, but that's when it's going to be hitting that closest point to making an exact trine. It doesn't come exact to the minute, but it comes exact by degree. And Mercury is going to come and form a grand trine at the same time that Saturn is stationing to go direct. And I see this as being something that's quite positive in the earth signs, especially because this is going to bring, I think, physical manifestation of something good, hopefully, especially with Saturn being so strong, you know, and Saturn rules like the physical and the boundaries between the non-physical and physical realm. You know, it takes everything that's non-physical and puts it into reality. And so, yeah, I'm interested to see if you have any thoughts on that.
Well, you know, Mercury becomes like the I mean, to me, you know, Mercury plays a real hermetic role in that relationship, right? And Mercury, you know, is the messenger of the gods and travels between worlds. Mm-hmm. And so in this trine, Mercury becomes the activator and the traveler, the messenger between Uranus and Saturn, which is the old and the new, right? Something interesting, you know, slightly radical, evolutionary, revolutionary, Uranian. And then we have Saturn, and Mercury plays this role. It like negotiates between these two perspectives, and I think it's pretty cool. So you know, it's being able to kind of move between things that you've done in the past and things that have worked, and trying things that are new and different and integrating them. You know, a lot of baby boomers are going through this Saturn-Uranus opposition, right? Have you been working with? I think my demographic's a little bit older.
My demographic is older than you would think.
Yeah, okay. So have you been working with people with this Saturn-Uranus opposition?
Probably not as much as you have, but yeah, a little bit.
Because the baby boomers have Uranus in Cancer, yeah. So Saturn's been opposing their natal Uranuses, right? And when that happens, that's like a clear sign of retirement, right? Do I stay with what I've been doing, Saturn, or do I do something different, Uranus?
That's exactly what I've been getting, is a lot of baby boomers coming to me. I mean, it's the retirement age, right, for a lot of baby boomers.
That's right.
Like right now in this like time period this year, for some reason, they're all like, hey, I think I need to retire, and like, you know, that kind of thing. So they're coming to me specifically wanting to know about their retirement plans and what they should do moving forward.
Right. And that's like the end of their work cycle, right? Because Saturn was there 30 years ago, right? So it's the end of this work cycle. And with this Mercury trine to Uranus and Saturn, that could open up some creative possibilities.
Okay.
For people that are in that Uranus-Saturn opposition in their lives. And it's difficult to watch people have to work longer than they should or need to, right?
Exactly, yeah. That's the hard part, because everybody wants to retire, but they don't feel like they can, and everybody's nervous. So they're going between this Uranus wanting to rebel and break free, and this Saturn of like having to stick to their responsibilities. And there's like a push and pull in either direction. And it's very, I mean, I can't tell you to just quit your job and like retire if you don't have money.
Right. So one of the things that I had a client, and she's right at this age, and we talked, and she told me about her job, and I'm like, you got to get a different job. And you would think that, well, that's not as easy as you think, but I think you can.
Yeah.
And the job that she had was underpaying her, overtaxing her, right? And I saw the rest of her chart, and I knew what she was capable of. I said, look, you can find something that you could probably work 10 hours less a week and make more money. You might even be able to do it at home. So the key for you is to, if you have to work, reconfigure what you're doing.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's possible. And it's really interesting because there are things going on with the workforce. Like there's a bandwidth of people that are around like between 45 let's say 48 and about say 60, who are still like employable, really employable, and they're good at what they do. They're smart. They have experience. Companies aren't hiring these people. They're not. They're hiring younger people who work for less. They can train, whatever. So there's a whole middle swath of people that are having a very difficult time. But at the other end, right, there seems to be maybe a pocket and kind of a niche for people at the other end, because they're not trying to find a high 5-figure or 6-figure job. So they can actually go into sort of another direction, because there are jobs that are not being fulfilled or filled well by younger people because they want to do whatever, right? They want to go work for a .com or, so there are niche positions that are 25 to 35, 40 hours a week. Maybe you work for a rental car agency and you do customer service at home. Right.
Yeah. Doing something more independent. That's Uranus moving into Taurus too.
That's
a lot of people are looking at doing something more independently, even if they are within the corporate world. So that's perfect.
And this is not a niche, by the way, that like the 48 to maybe 58, 60 people want to fill. They still feel like I want to contribute.
Yeah.
I know I've got like another really good run in me. Right. So they're not always going to be like going after those gigs. And then the millennials will want to try to get into, whatever, the .com world, whatever they're doing, right? Education, government. So I feel like there's some openings there for people in that range, in that zone. So don't give up hope if you're going through that Saturn Uranus opposition. Don't feel like you're trapped, because you're not.
Yeah, that's one of the things too that a few of my clients I've kind of advised them to do, is to do something a little bit more independent, right? And that way they don't feel like they're toiling away, and it's like a precursor to retirement. It's like gently easing yourself into it.
That's right.
My mom is an example of that. She's a boomer, and she just went down to half-time at her job. That's a really good solution. She's still bringing in money. She's collecting Social Security at the same time, while she's working part-time, so she can do both. And so that is a way that she's still getting a little extra money coming in, but she's working only part-time. I think it's like less than half-time that she's working now.
Yeah. So I think that this Mercury trine, Saturn trine, Uranus can be really good for people if they're looking to solve some of those issues.
Absolutely. Okay, good. I like that. That's good news. And I like that. That's a really good time for some sort of material manifestation. If you want to change something for the long term, if you've been planning something during this Mercury retrograde that you want to sort of actually move forward with, and you want to make a major change, but a change that's going to stabilize you and provide a solid foundation for you moving forward, that's the energy of Mercury, Uranus, Saturn in the earth signs, right? And so this would be a time for you to kind of move forward with something. It's going to be a dark moon at that time too, but you can initiate and sort of, that's a good time to launch something or launch into a new plan.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
Cool. Well, do you have anything else you want to?
Yeah, I think we picked the meat off this chicken, right? There's no meat left on these bones. I think we did it.
Yeah, we were very thorough. This was a very thorough investigation.
We went longer too. I mean, this is an hour 42, right? Basically.
Well, we deconstructed the eclipses from last time, and we went into it. So we did a lot in a short amount of time, if you really think about it.
Here, pat yourself on the back.
Yeah, good job.
All right, listen, thank you for being here and watching our video. And we do this roughly once a month, and maybe more in the future, if popular demand continues to surge and rise for our videos.
Yeah.
But Heather, thanks again. You're great. You're terrific. I brag about you all the time. Heather and I met on Facebook, and I just reached out to her one day. And ironically, she said, "Hey, I've always wanted to study with you." I'm like, wow, cool. Okay, so then Heather became like my top-rated student, and a smashing success story. And I'm so proud of her. And she's become an amazing astrologer. And I'm just thrilled to be able to do this with you, and connect with this level, So you can find her over on Facebook. You want to talk about your pages on Facebook?
My Facebook page is in transition. It's Persephone Returns / Astrology with Heather, because they won't let me change it without my tax ID. And my YouTube channel, Beyond Astrology with Heather. And obviously you can find Robert at robertphoenix.com. I don't know whose channel you're watching this on, so it just kind of depends. But yeah, you can find us both on YouTube. Just search us, and we're all over the place. And thank you so much, Robert. I am so glad that we were able to do this, and I love doing this with you every month. It's kind of like back when we were in Austin and we got to meet each month and talk about astrology, except now we're sharing that conversation with like thousands.
Oh, I know. Yeah, it's good. We get to share it with the world now.
Yeah.
So, hey, stay cool out there in Arizona.
All right. Thank you.
Okay. Bye.
We'll see you next time.